Now on this video, I'm going to try to show how to take clear urethane paint. These are motorcycle parts that I'm going to be buffing out. And if you're new to doing this, if you've never done it before, and you're willing to invest about a half an hour of your time to see how I do it, I've been pretty successful at doing this to a lot of antique and older motorcycles, guitars, model airplanes, various other things. But there's a basic technique. It's not that difficult, and it's definitely not expensive. What it is labor intensive. It takes a little effort, and if you're willing to take that effort and you have an antique motorcycle or something that you've painted or anything that you want to make just a little bit more high gloss and shiny, I've tried to do this in real time. Real time meaning that there's no camera cut. So it is about a 20-minute segment of the video that might or might not be boring to some people, but I'm imparting some very good information if you're new to this, and I think it's information that'll give you about 100% chance of having success. Now these are some of the parts in the course of making this video. All of these other parts, and including the whole paint job of this motorcycle, is out on the video in various pieces. But this is, I've tried to condense this down into doing one piece from the start to the end. Might get a little boring, might get a little longer than what you want, but I guarantee that information that's in there is gold. That information should allow you to have success, and I have purposely not left out any steps, anything that would make it any more difficult than it has to be. I've been doing this pretty much for my whole life since I've been 15 years old. I've been buffing out paint on model airplanes, cars, motorcycles, guitars, everything. And I've tried to condense all that basic information. Again, it's relatively straightforward, it's relatively simple, but it is labor intensive. So check this out. This is how I do it. Now in this video, I want to try to show that one of the little techniques I use, and we're using it at this point in time on my track bike project, to put a final finish on a paint that's been parted, that's been painted and has clear urethane on it. Now I just want to show the part up close first. Yeah, it looks kind of shiny, but as you look at it real close, there's some dust, because we're not painting in a spray booth environment. We don't have a spray booth, that's the reason why. Pretty simple reason. But now a lot of people would be very happy with this finish, and this is a track bike, so maybe I should be happy with it too, I don't know. But I wanted to show it. It's a relatively simple, relatively inexpensive thing to buff out paint. Couple of things. The paint has to be dry. If you try to do this while the paint is still soft, and in the case of painting in the winter, paint takes a lot longer to dry. So the first step is, I have some 2000 grit sandpaper. You can tell the number, and they make 3000 grit, 2500. This is 2000. I found that to be, for this project, plenty good. If you were doing a real show bike that you had put a lot of time into the paint work in, you might want to have 2500 or 3000. So the first step on any of these things is I have a little bucket of soapy water. Always want to keep the paper good and wet. And a lot of people are real hesitant to take a part that looks, in their eyes, shiny and sand it. Now when you sand it, of course, and I'm going to try to show this in real time without camera breaks and Photoshop and whatever. 2000 grit paper, usually in a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, will dull out a surface. Now you can also do this to paint, assuming the paint has enough clear on it. Now a lot of factory bikes, factory parts, have a very little amount of clear because they don't intend you to do this. So when I buff a part, I'm buffing on at least 3 coats of clear, sometimes 5 or 6 depending on the project. If I'm doing a show bike, I may even have more, you don't know. But one of the tricks of putting a lot of coats of clear on is just put each coat on and let it dry a few days before you put the next coat. Don't put it on one right after another. And that's what we've done with this bike, is put a coat on, waited a few days, put a coat on, waited a few days. And even though this is a track bike, it's not going to any shows or anything, we just want to have this surface dull. and I wanted to show this as step one. Now, and it doesn't matter if you're doing a guitar, a boat, a model airplane, or whatever, to just buff a part that's not been 2,000 grit sandpapered, what happens is it takes a lot more time to buff it. So the first step is I wanted to look at this and candle it. Now in my shop, all of the lights here are fluorescent, but you can see, and I'm going to try to show this, but I'm not sure it's going to come off. If you can see, there's a little shiny spot there, a little spot where the dust got into it because we're painting outside, of course. Some of the little areas up here. But before I do any buffing, I want to have all of these little shiny spots dull. So, and again, it can take a little time. The finer grit paper, the bigger the number is, the finer the grit. A couple drops of dish soap in the water is all you need. But this part of it can be a little labor intensive depending on how big the part is and how flat it is. A complex shaped part, sometimes you have to either make a little polishing tool or just do it by hand while you're sitting watching television or whatever. But I've done this for many years, kind of narrowed down a lot of things that don't work for me and a lot of things that should work. But the biggest part of it right now is once that clear is dry is make sure it's good and hard. Make sure that you don't have any little shiny spots. The whole thing is flat, dull. Sometimes this on a big part can get a little boring. Now we got a little spot up here. And as I just go through and pick away at these little spots, it's going to take a little time, a few minutes. But when we're done, before we move on to the buffing part, which is kind of the easy part, this is the hard part, getting rid of anything that's shiny. Now, of course, if you have a spray booth, you'll have a lot less in the final coat. And if you're a lot less fussy, if you just want to have a paint finish that a little bit of dust in it doesn't mean anything, a little bit of orange peel, whatever, that's all in the eye of the beholder. But in my case, and I've been painting over 50 years, so I really take a lot of pride in having some really nice paintwork, whether it's the motorcycle or a guitar, whatever it may be. We've even painted some outboard engines for people for their boats, among other things that, and of course a lot of model airplanes. Now I'm closing in on having this, and if you see it in real time, it'll kind of make sense. It annoys me when somebody does a camera chop right in the middle of something and you say, well, how long did that take? Well, now, as this dries, it's going to show more and more of the little wet spots. If I show it up here now, it's basically flat and dull. And out on this same YouTube channel, there's many videos of different paint jobs that we've done here in the shop. There's some model airplane videos doing the same thing. But once you have this surface, and this is a 2000 grit dull surface, we're pretty much done with the water now. Let me put the water away. And this is the part that gets to be fun. This is a product, they make this in several grits. This is the finest of the grit. Normally, if you were doing a show bike, a real high-end show bike or show car, you'd want all three of the grits. You'd want to do the sanding, then you'd want to use the roughest grit, move on to the next grit, and then finish it with this grit. But I found with this urethane, and this is the least expensive of the urethanes. This is Gavin's urethane. That the prefix numbers are 77. So what happens is with this material, there's a couple of little tips that I've learned. Number one, you head down to Old Harbor Freight and you buy this. It lists price for $15. If you have a coupon, it's around $11. You buy a set of pads and you never change the pad. You use this pad with this material. You don't use another material and then put some other compound or wax. This pad will stay with this material for the life of what we're doing. Now, in this material will take a little bit longer than normal to put a shine on to bring that gloss up. And again, because I already have some material on here. And when you buy these pads, by the way, in Harbor Freight, of course, very inexpensive. It's not a good idea to try to get the ultimate mileage out of them, because once they get hard and gritty, they're not going to put a nice shine on anything. I try to smear this material around. Now, this material, which I get at the Body Shop Supply, is relatively expensive. The buffing wheel and buffer is relatively cheap. So, again, depending on the shape of the part, and this part, because it's almost flat, should be relatively easy to do. Notice that word relative appears in a lot of these sentences. Now, you can also do this. I've done this too. I've bought bikes that are 30 years old. 2000 grit the paint. Don't over sand it, because you're just removing paint that you really want to leave on. And typically the older paints will buff up really, really, really nice. Now, you could do the same thing by hand. You can take a microfiber and do it by hand. The pads that you buy, you can buy microfiber pads. You can buy all kinds of high-tech foam pads. You can buy, and I have one outside. I actually ought to show it on one of the future videos. I have the big buffer that you can make it turns around in a circle. That tends to put swirls on. This is orbital. And I don't have any choices. For $12, you don't get a lot of choices. It's strictly orbital. Now, what I try to do, if there's nobody in the shop, I either put on some TV show, a football game, or a GP race, or a cafe racer episode or something. Now, notice what I'm doing is I'm not doing this, holding this in one spot. That's really kind of a no-no. A way you can tell if you're overdoing it is feel the part with your hand. If it's getting hot, you're probably not doing yourself a favor. It's got to stay cool. I try to go around the edges, because the edges are going to pick up the sunlight. And the trick at this point is don't get bored. Don't say, oh, I'm done with that part, and run off and have a salami sandwich. The trick is kind of just keep moving it around little by little. It doesn't have to be as fast as I'm doing it, but it's not a good idea to do that. It's not a good idea to hold it on an edge. Where there's a mountaintop, there's a high spot, you'd like to not hold it on the high spot. You'd like to do that edge, and then just work up to that and touch it. Same thing with the edges here, here, and here. Now, as many people as have learned over the course of either watching Windy videos or worked in the shop or learned the techniques I've used, believe me, there's a million ways to paint. There's a million ways to do things. If money is no object, you can buy this in 3 different grades. You can buy a $200 buffer. You can buy all kinds of things. The thing to always remember is when you're buffing out paint, be working under a fluorescent light. If you do it in incandescent light, it doesn't show up nearly as well. Now, I can see from looking at this real close, we're starting to work up having a shine already. So the trick is now, just don't get bored. Don't get bored. There's no effort involved. I can do this with my left hand, my right hand. I can let the part walk around. I have a bench with some towels that kind of hold it down. Now, usually when you put the material on wet, it's going to show that you're always wet, 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 wet. And then it eventually will dry out, and you'll think, oh, I need to put more material. That you really don't. Once you get some material on there, it's going to dry itself out. And you're going to wind up with, assuming you don't lose patience and you just tough it out, you're going to wind up with, whether it's an old part, a new part, you're going to wind up with a finish that's absolutely amazing. And I've always used this as an example. When I first bought the R1 that I have, I took it apart and took all the stickers off it and buffed out the paint as the first cosmetic change I made to the bike. And I went back to Motorcycle Mall to where there were 3 or 4 other R1s, parked in front of the building on a sunny day and parked mine right in the middle of the pack. And you could stand back and see, there was no question in my mind, or anybody, actually in anybody's mind, whose bike was shinier. It was kind of a, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. And now that was important to me, it may not be important to some people. Flushing the toilet isn't important to some people. And as much as I laugh about it, the one thing now, whether you buy an old bike that's 30, 40 years old and the paint needs work, or if you have brand new paint and you just want to make it as nice as possible, what this does, it allows you to clean a bike, wax it so easily. When it's shiny, anything shiny is easy to maintain. Anything with a flat, dull finish is a bear to keep clean. Now, I don't like to push so hard that I hear the buffer slowing down. Again, this is an inexpensive thing. It eventually, at some point in time, burns out the brushes. You can buy universal brushes in Lowe's and just replace them, or usually at that point, the bearings are shot in the motor and stuff. Because I use these, they're really not made to be an industrial tool, but I use it like one. And no matter how many hours you do this, assuming you're not bored, a lot of this stuff you can do without even taking a bike apart. You can do the gas tank, you can do the fairing, the taking, but it's easier, of course, right now, it's easier if you just have the parts in your hand. Now, you'll always add some shine and gloss by putting Carnauba wax on this, but until you're happy with the shine, I wouldn't want to Carnauba wax it because you may want to add another coat of clear. This material here has no silicone in it, so I could just, if I was not happy or if I buff through on an edge or something, what I can do is just go down and sand it a little more, clean it with M600 and put another coat of paint on it. Again, it gets boring after some time. It's always good to have somebody keeping you company, or have a TV or a radio or whatever on. But again, it's so, years ago, a buffer used to be a couple of $100, a good one. Now, a serviceable buffer for under $15 is all you really need to do these kind of parts. Now, once it's to that point, microfibers do work a lot better than, I just happen to have this towel in here right now. Now, what I've done is, I've gotten some of the spots as shiny as I need them, some of them not. So I'm going to move the part around so I hit it with a different edge of the buffer. And I'm kind of to the point, yes, I have dried out all the material. Once it's dry and you see you're not swirling material around, you have to add a little material. But it's always better to put a little bit of material down twice than make a big puddle of stuff that you can't get off the part. Now, in the case of model airplanes, we used to do almost all the buffing by hand with Bounty paper towels. It was very labor intensive. A motorcycle is a lot easier because the paint is on a lot thicker. A guitar, for instance, you can just pile of paint on. You can put 20 coats of clear on. But it's a very, I think, a very easy way to upgrade stuff. What I'm doing, I'm trying not to get up on the ridge here and take the point off the ridge. Now, another thing you can always try is Bounty paper towels, or microfibers, or a clean towel. Now, what's different is the shine we had before was kind of a plastic looking, I don't know how to really describe it. it had the look of a piece of plastic. The shine we have now is more of a shine you would get from a painted surface. Again, I've still missed some spots up here. I'm being really fussy. I really want this part to shine when I'm done. And patience is the name of the game here. If you're impatient, you're really not going to have the kind of success you'll have if you just take your time. Because once you're done with this, maintaining this finish for the life of the motorcycle is nothing but some Meguiar's wax, some spray detailer or whatever. Now I always go back, because once I see that I've gotten the part shiny, and there's still a couple little dull spots. Again, I'm very fussy about this. Most people would just be happy with less of a shine. I'd like to have it as nice as possible. Just me and my personal way I like to do things. And in my case, I like to just sometimes take the motorcycle out of the garage, put it in a driveway, get that old Carnauba wax out, wax it all up, and just sit and have my lunch looking at it. I always think motorcycles are really like pieces of artwork when they're polished up and cleaned up. Now again, if you look at it from any angle, there's always going to be an angle you'll see some spot that could use a little more. And now you've reached a point, or I'm at the point now, where it's just a question of how fussy do I want to be. Now what I would normally have, and I won't do it on this one, but on a future video, I'll take another pad, a totally distinct pad with Carnauba wax, and that'll preserve the finish even if we take a ride in a rainstorm, or the bike sits out in a garage wall for 3 months without being touched. Now I'm looking, and again, I'm looking for little spots. There's one spot right there I'd like to get rid of. And again, you may not see the difference, because this is not really like a, especially if you're looking at this on a cell phone, you're really not going to see anything. But when you see the parts in real life, or you see them out in bright sun. See, when you're working under fluorescent lights, it shows all the mistakes. When you're working out in an incandescent light, it masks all the mistakes. So any shop that's really doing very high quality work, you want all the lights to be fluorescent, because the fluorescent allows you to pick up the mistakes with your eyes a lot better. Now I'm not sure, I really am not sure, if that's going to have the intended look when I take it out in the sun. I'm going to go take it out in the sun, see if I see any spots that I'm really not happy with right now. But that would be my technique for basically for buffing out a motorcycle part in about 15-20 minutes. There's probably 8-10 parts, so you can figure out how much time it would take to do a whole motorcycle, and you could do a whole car actually this way. Anything that's painted, and all the stuff that the buffer and the pads and everything from Harbor Freight are so much cheaper than anywhere else, that always look in Harbor Freight first. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed watching that and picked up some good information. Now, I've enjoyed sharing the information that I've learned over a lifetime of painting. Right now, as you're probably watching this, several of my friends are buffing out parts of their motorcycle. People worldwide have responded to these videos and said how much value they had and how much they enjoyed it, and thank you for all the nice comments. But the biggest thing of all is the joy of doing this is when you put your motorcycle back together and it's all buffed out, or if you never take it apart, you do it while it's in one piece. There's a joy you get from having something shiny. When it's shiny, to me, it's more attractive and it's much easier to clean. And with a nice coat of carnauba on, it'll be protected whether you ride on the track or ride on the street. Now, if you're new to our channel, we have a very, very eclectic channel. One of the new features we have now is some of the videos are grouped into groups that you can access all the videos for one category in one mouse click. And it should be very convenient and very handy. Just check out the feature on the main screen playlist. And thanks to everybody for supporting the channel. We appreciate your support, and it makes this channel possible with all the things we do, the painting, the wheels, the polishing. And please take a second or two and hit the like button. And thanks everyone for watching.